Hello.
Hello. Yes.
Hi, Chris.
Hello. Hello, hello, hello.
Hi, everyone.
What are you knitting tonight, Sally?
What am I missing?
No, what are you knitting?
I'm not missing anything, am I? I'd like to be missing something. I'm knitting another jumper. I'm knitting one for my dad now. Jumper number 5 of COVID lockdowns.
Gosh.
Oh, I just want to know what everyone else is doing. If you're not knitting, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
I've been planting seeds.
What, in the evening when it's dark?
No.
I only knit in evenings.
Playing with my granddaughter on Skype.
Yeah. Oh, look at this. Stroud District Green Party AGM.
Can't see all the people now.
Hi everyone.
Can't because of screen sharing. You can see people down the side if you've got it set for that.
Yeah, no, I can. Yeah.
See some people. Everyone.
Right.
Hi, Alice. Nice to see you.
Lost the gallery view.
Maybe
because of the screen.
Might be nice to take the screen share off so we can see each other until we start.
Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah, see who's here then, can't we? I like to have a good old stare at everyone, see who's there.
It feels you're not in the room.
Hi, Nora.
People I haven't seen for an awfully long time.
Do people just want to chuck their name in the chat? It would just help Phil, who's taking the minutes. And if you don't have your actual name on your screen, if you're able to put your actual name on the screen, that would be great. Just because for the second part of the meeting, we need to know whether you're members or not.
You just want us to write our name in the chat.
Yeah, Neil, if you can just put it in the chat.
Just your name.
Just your name. Yeah, that would be great. Your full name. That'd be brilliant.
Wow.
You know, you can download a list of who was in the meeting out of Zoom afterwards.
Okay.
Do you know that?
No,
you
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you can. My yoga teacher does it every week.
Brilliant.
Even if you're not using the registration thing, you can do it.
Okay. How do you do that, Sally?
Well, it'll be in the meeting. I think it's in reports. You go into the meeting settings afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's...
Wow, isn't this weird? Who's made the cakes for afterwards?
Yes.
Hi, Seth.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Hi. Nice to see you, Liz.
I've been watching your snowy tobogganing, sledging on Facebook.
Plenty of snow here.
Probably not a big deal, really, is it? We had one day of sledging.
It is for me still.
hi, Andy. Andy Watson, thanks for joining us. So,
Hi, thank you.
hi. We'll get going in a minute.
This is very quiet for the Green Party. Gets to a certain number of people when it's the etiquette of who's going to speak first gets hard.
Well, else everybody starts at once. Yeah.
You know, I think we get better turnout at our meetings now that we're online than before when we met in person.
Yeah.
Well, it's easier, to be fair, isn't it? For those of us who don't live in Stroud, it's easier.
Yeah.
There's endless conversations about when we were going to have the meeting in Stroud or somewhere else. It's wonderfully irrelevant now.
And we don't pay for it. Well, we do pay for Zoom, but
What did we have at the Stonehouse Climate Action meeting on Saturday? 5 different continents represented.
yep,
Somebody from Papua, someone from Malaysia.
Wow.
yeah, it's amazing.
Then no idea what they were doing there.
They were learning about the wonderful trees in Stonehouse and the
Yeah.
amazing community arboretum.
And the amazing Climate Action Group.
Right. We'll just give it one more minute and then we'll get started. I'm assuming you're all right, Phil, taking the minutes, but let me know if you want to slow down with anything or clarify anything.
Seth and Andy, are you guys going to want to share your screen at all?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Seth.
Okay, I think we'll get started. It's great to see everybody, so many people here. Welcome to the AGM. The first part of the meeting is going to be a discussion about proportional representation. Alan Mossman, who most of you probably know, is going to do the introduction. And then we've got Andy Watson from Make Votes Matter in Warrington. And we've got Seth Piper, who people will possibly know from the help that he gave us at the general election in 2019. And he's going to give the Norwegian. So we'll get going with that. And if I could just ask you to keep yourself muted while they're talking. There'll be about 20 minutes of presentation, and then we can have questions at the end. And this part will last about an hour, then we'll have a quick break, and then the second part is for members only, and we'll discuss the business of the AGM. Okay, so if I can hand over to Alan then. Oh, great.
I thought you were handing over to Simon first.
Oh, I'm really sorry. Yes, I should have been handing over to Simon. Thanks, Alan. Yeah, Simon's going to open the meeting and give a welcome and introduction from the party. Sorry, Simon.
So you want me to go now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, welcome to the 2021 Stroud Green Party AGM. I've no idea what number AGM it is, possibly 36th, 37th AGM of the Stroud Green Party. Certainly there's some people on this call who I know who have been coming to Stroud Green Party AGMs for at least 30 years. Green Party is the political wing of the environment movement, and it is about winning arguments and winning votes, whether that's votes to get elected or votes in the council chamber or in Parliament or the London Assembly. Stroud District Green Party has been one of the sort of the leaders in many fields, because not only did we get one of the first Green councillors elected, John Margeman, in 1986. I think we were also the first Green Party in the country that had a Green Party member as chair of the committee of a principal authority committee in the mid-90s. But like many of you on this call, many of the people who got elected started off as campaigners. And in Stroud, it's from saving the High Street to the George in Nailsworth, to Stratford Park trees, to stopping the Ring Road, Uplands Post Office to Hill Pool, or more recently, the incinerator and XR. But moving from being a protester to winning votes, other than just winning the argument, is quite a change. It's quite a step. It is a step up. And it's a challenge because it's a different responsibility, because there you're actually relying on working with others and actually negotiating with officers to actually make change in a council chamber. And that is very different from banging away and shouting your argument time and time again until somebody listens to you. You have to negotiate. The Green Party has had massive success nationally. Just recently, we now have, I think it's 351 councillors elected and 125 councils across the country, of which 18 councils, principal authorities, Greens are sharing power. This is a far, far higher ratio than any other political party in terms of actually the ratio of elected councillors to actually control or being in control or in partnership for running a local authority. And that's when the hard work really starts, because putting forward things to make change, as I've said, is far harder than stopping something. As many of us have found out recently, promoting things, promoting developments, promoting change for climate change, even things like changing the way the bins are collected. You know, people are always complaining. And it's much easier to say, no, I don't like this, than to say, yes, I want this, and this is why I want it. But when you're working in partnership, which goes back to the theme of this meeting in many ways, you do need to negotiate. And in Stroud, we've been lucky that we've been running the district council. We've been running the district council in partnership with two other political parties since 2012. So we've experienced of that negotiation of coalition administrations, and that's one of the important things. And it's hopefully one of the things that would come out with a change in the voting system. So I just welcome you all to the AGM. Look forward to hearing the debate about Make Votes Matters. I also encourage anybody who's not actively involved to get involved, to either become work as part of a party organizer, organizing the party, help with some of the forthcoming elections, and of course, come to the meetings, learn more about Green Party, and really get involved. And when running up to the election, we'll need lots of people out there leafleting, canvassing, and of course, phone canvassing to win votes to get more Green councillors elected in Stroud. Thank you very much. I'll now hand over to Alan.
Thank you very much, Simon. Somebody who's complained to you earlier on this afternoon, but let's forget that. I'd like
You weren't complaining about dog mutt, were you?
No.
Bins? Probably.
Bins, yes. I'd like to introduce Andy. Andy grew up in Merseyside and has lived in Warrington for most of his adult life. It was the issue of our dysfunctional first past the post electoral system that really got Andy fired up in 2015 and got him to be politically active. So he didn't go down the route that Simon's just been talking about. He went down a different route, and that's why he's here as a spokesman for Make Votes Matter. We're the third Green Party that Andy has spoken to. Andy, I'd love you to start, please.
Well, thank you, Alan. Thank you for that. Thank you for the introduction there. So, hello, everyone. My name is Andy Watson, and I'm here today to talk about proportional representation on behalf of Make Votes Matter. Now, Make Votes Matter is the cross-party campaign for proportional representation for the House of Commons elections. Personally, I have no affiliation currently of any political party. So what is proportional representation? It simply means that political parties gain seats in proportion to the number of votes cast for them. Systems of PR are used in 85% of developed OECD countries. Here in the UK, we don't use PR. We use a winner-takes-all mechanism known by the horse racing terminology of first past the post, or FPTP, if you like. The only other OECD countries who use first past the post, along with us in the UK, are Canada and the United States. The 2015 general election is often described as the most disproportionate election in UK electoral history. Three parties combined got just under 25% of the vote. However, these same three parties only managed to get about 1.5% of the seats between them. One of those parties I'm referring to is, of course, the Green Party of England and Wales. In the two general elections that followed, the Green Party has only managed to get one MP elected, Caroline Lucas, and that is despite the Greens polling more votes in 2019 than they did in 2017. It was in the aftermath of that disproportionate general election that Make Votes Matter was formed. When we all go to the polls on general election day, we're all really just voting in an individual election to decide which man or woman is to be elected as the local MP for our constituency. Under the winner-takes-all nature of first past the post, only votes for the winning candidate to the point of one more vote than the second place candidate in a constituency actually count. Personally, I've only ever voted for a winning candidate once in 7 general elections. And even then, the candidate I was voting for was in a safe seat, so they were expected to win anyway. So therefore, I would argue that my vote has always gone to waste. In the general election of 2019, it took 26,000 votes to elect a Scottish National Party MP. It took 38,000 votes for the Conservatives to win a seat, 50,000 votes for Labour to win a seat, 336,000 votes for the Lib Dems to win a seat, whilst it took 857,500 votes for the Greens to win just one seat altogether. Whatever one may say about the Brexit Party, 644,000 people voted for them and they didn't win any MPs, any seats at all. When we look at how governments are typically formed under first past the post, they are typically single party governments acting on a clear minority of the vote, who in effect gain bonus seats to deliver a false majority. And in that general election just over a year ago, the Conservatives got 56% of the vote, despite only getting 44% of the popular vote. Sorry, 56% of the seats, sorry. In 2015, the Tories got 51% of the seats and a 12-seat majority on just 37% of the vote. Whilst last time Labour won a parliamentary majority in 2005, they got about 55% of the seats on just 35% of the vote, which I think was a majority of like 65 off the top of my head. Clearly, there is no link between how people vote and how the makeup of Parliament is reflected, and not getting a Parliament reflects how we vote can have dangerous consequences, not only in Britain, but also in Canada and the States, those two other OECD countries who use first past the post. Green parties in both those countries are also underrepresented. Studies have found that countries using proportional systems set stricter environmental policies and were faster to ratify the Kyoto Protocol. On environmental performance, studies by Lippert in 2012 and Orellana in 2014 found that countries with PR scored 6 points higher on the Yale Environmental Performance Index, which measures 10 policy areas, including environmental health, air quality, resource management, biodiversity and habitat, forestry, fisheries, agriculture, and climate change. Of course, I fully appreciate I'm right now speaking to an audience in which all of these issues will be right at the top of your agendas. Better outcomes in countries that use PR go beyond environmental outcomes. Links exist between proportionality and equality, both in terms of gender and income. There have been links established between proportional voting systems and being less likely to go to war also. When it comes to assessing political stability, a respected measure is the Fragile States Index, which is published by the US think tank, the Fund for Peace. This aims to assess a country's vulnerability to collapse or conflict, and the index's ranks are based on 12 indicators of state vulnerability grouped into 4 categories, which are cohesion, economic, political, and social. The current index recognises for the Nordic countries and Switzerland as the most stable. And other countries that use PR, including Germany, Portugal, the Netherlands, and New Zealand, also score high in terms of stability. Now, if this was a meeting in a real meeting room right now, I'd be walking around the room right now with my clipboard, asking you all to sign up to the Make Votes Matter, Make Votes Matter mailing list. And I think Alan might have just posted the link there now. So yeah, so that's the time. I'd like that link posted there. Thanks for that, Alan. Much appreciated. Now, proponents of the first past the post voting system will post quite a few myths in their pursuit to maintain the status quo. I will talk a bit about one of them. Apparently, first past the post produces strong and stable government. Well, that is news to me, considering the UK has had 4 elections over the last decade. Also, Canada's had 6 federal elections since 2004. There is also speculation that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau may want to call a new election in the spring, having lost his majority in 2019. Proponents of first past the post are often quick to point out the number of times Italy has had a change of government since World War II. What these people are less enthusiastic to discuss is the fact that the UK has actually had more general elections in that time frame. Since ditching first past the post for PR in 1986, every single New Zealand Parliament for 3 years has run its full term. Furthermore, early elections in Germany and the Nordic countries are actually quite rare. There are quite a few other myths the first past the post proponents peddle, which can be viewed on a myth-busting page on the Make Votes Matter website. And this is something some of you may choose to have a discussion a bit later on about some of these other myths, for example, more power to extremists. However, for all the arguments that the first past the post proponents make, what they fail to explain is why there are serious pro-PR campaigns in Britain, Canada, and the United States, but no serious pro-first past the post campaigns in those countries that use PR. And on that note, I'll just talk a little bit more about Make Votes Matter's strategy for winning fair votes. The strategy for winning fair votes has 4 objectives. They are securing an electoral reform commitment from the Labour Party, the alliance and the consensus about the path to PR, the use of the grassroots movement to increase the visibility of PR, and ensuring the sustainability of the movement for proportional representation. Regards the Labour Party, winning the backing of one of the biggest 2 parties is considered to be essential to winning fair votes, and Make Votes Matter has worked relentlessly with the Labour campaign for electoral reform in recent years, visiting hundreds of local party branches. And as we speak right now, over 150 constituency Labour parties have passed motions in support of proportional representation. In polling that was conducted for Make Votes Matter in December 2019, it was revealed that 76% of Labour members now back PR, and it is hoped that that support will be mobilised amongst affiliated trade unions and Labour Party members to secure a motion for PR at Labour's next conference late this year. The Alliance brings together all the parties, organisations and public figures who want PR. There have been quarterly meetings every 3 months since the 2017 general election. The Alliance coordinates cross-party campaigning on the single issue of PR. The Alliance also works to build consensus about the route to change. In July 2019, the Good Systems Agreement was launched. The Good Systems Agreement is a cross-party agreement that establishes principles on the kind of voting system we need and how to get to it. One of the reason for that Good Systems Agreement is because there will, of course, be different electoral reform supporters who will have different opinions about what particular system they would prefer. Now, the Good Systems Agreement was signed by all opposition parties, aside from Labour, individual Labour, Conservative and Independent MPs. The other strand is the grassroots movement. Grassroots activism is carried out both locally and nationally to attract the attention of local and national media and to inform, educate and mobilise members of our communities. Make Votes Matter normally has a couple of national election days each year. With the unusual circumstances of last year, The action days were socially distanced, where campaigners would stand alone or 2 meters apart and have pictures taken at local landmarks. And these pictures holding placards, and these pictures would then be shared on social media. In a few weeks' time, there is a virtual lobby planned for activists to speak to their MP. Now, as I draw my side of the talk to a close, I want to say a few words about the pandemic. There are a lot of opinions out there on how the current UK government responded to COVID, whether it be mixed messaging, not enough PPE earlier in the pandemic, or being too slow to lock down and so on. Some people will say our Labour government would have done so much better. Just look at Jacinda Ardern over in New Zealand, whose government acted early and hard. Now, yes, Jacinda Ardern does lead New Zealand's Labour Party. However, she was until relatively recently leading a coalition government that included 2 different parties from different parts of the political spectrum. Look at Germany. Some people would say we are pretty similar, both like football and beer. Britain and Germany is not like comparing apples and oranges. Yet somehow the British death rate has been somehow significantly bigger than that of Germany. What countries like Germany, New Zealand, and other countries who use proportional voting systems do demonstrate is that better decisions are taken in a political culture based on compromise and consensus. And if I just ask Alan once more just to post up the link to the Make Votes Matter mailing list, that would be lovely. And also it's important, if you're not already doing so, not engaged with the local branch, to please get in touch with Make Votes Matter Stroud. And I believe the email address is mvmstroud@gmail.com. I'm sure Alan will correct me if that's wrong. And finally, as a country, we should not have to put up with living in a sham democracy. We can do so much better. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much indeed, Andy. We'll hold questions for a moment. We're going to listen to Seth next. Seth grew up in Gloucestershire, but for the last 10 years or so, he spent most of his time in Norway, unless there's been a general election here. He works as a consultant to non-profit and political organisations in Oslo, and most recently for the Norwegian Green Party as a campaign manager. Seth, you're going to share your screen and take us through your slides. If you hear that ping ping, that's because you've got 4 minutes left and then 1 minute left.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, to share my screen, so whoever's sharing the screen now, that's it. Okay. So I've prepared a short presentation for today. Yeah, I'm Seth. Some of you know me from 2019. So I grew up in Gloucestershire and I moved to Norway when I was about 24. And today I'm going to talk about trying to sum up the way the Norwegian political or electoral system works and give my impressions of how the two systems contrast, having been involved in politics, yeah, in both countries. So as you had, as was just summarized now, really the electoral system in the UK can't be described as being fair or proportional, where, you know, from election to election, the majority of the votes often don't count to the final result. And you could live your entire life without ever voting for the winning candidate. So your views have never been represented at Parliament. So as I like to say, too many votes go in the bin. The Norwegian voting system is a proportional system. So that means more or less every single vote counts to the final result. I won't go into too much detail about the specifics of the system, but basically voters choose a party which is represented in their voting district or the constituency by a list of names. It's a fixed list. And that leads to a result where there are up to 9 parties. At the moment, we've got 9 parties in Parliament sharing 169 seats. And every government going back 50 years has been a coalition government. More or less every single government has been parties working together. The way that they try and ensure every single vote counts, even for the small parties, is that they have a voting threshold. So if the smaller parties reach at least 4% of the overall vote, they're gifted what's called a leveling seat. so that the seats match votes as much as is possible. This also contributes to stop there being far too many parties and it being too messy. So this varies across the Nordics. Norway has also chosen to actually weigh the votes, the rural votes more than the urban votes, which is supposed to make it fairer for people who live in small, or yeah, in rural areas. So if I was going to sum up the difference between the voting system, which I think about a lot, obviously the Norwegian system it feels fairer, it is fairer, objectively speaking. Politics in general is more emphasis on cooperation and less on conflict and division. Politics itself tends to be more diverse, get more diverse candidates, especially in terms of political views. Nobody's lumped together as they are in the two big parties in two-party systems, which means there's a lot less internal conflict as well. There's also increased participation, voter turnout in local and national elections. And also quite importantly, it is this kind of gender politics that we've heard about but never actually seen. So this is what the Norwegian Parliament chamber looks like. The parties themselves are grouped together, but as you'll see, and just like in, for example, the European Parliament, they're shaped in a horseshoe or in a circle, because the emphasis is very much on finding ways to work together rather than shouting and heckling each other. So it, in general, just feels a lot more civilized. You can follow it. You can watch a stream on the Norwegian government website if you want to see what it's like. But it's a series of speeches and small jokes and people nodding along. But they do get things done. Norway, just by the by, Norway's had one of the best responses to COVID in the world, or certainly in Europe. We've had around 600 deaths in total for a country of 5 million. So my experience in politics, I've been volunteering and active in politics for about 8 years. And I started working in politics a few years ago. And I was responsible in 2019 for the local elections in Oslo. I came straight from that actually back to Stroud when the general election was called. So yeah, this is our main candidate. She was re-elected to the city government. This is what the result looked like. So on the left, you've got the Conservative Party, who won the most seats, and the second biggest, the Labour, who won the second most seats. And we actually came third, and we won 9 seats. And what this led to was a continuation of the coalition. Since 2015, the Greens have been in a coalition with these 2 other parties, the Labour Party and the Socialist Left Party. And I asked Einar, who's on the left there, what he wanted to say about this. And he said he just can't believe that they were standing so close together. But from having worked closely with these people in the city hall, you know, it genuinely is it's a good cooperation. It's a constructive cooperation. These are colleagues. They come from different parties. They have different ideologies, but they treat each other as colleagues. They treat each other with respect. They really stand together behind the decisions. So it's really great to see, because my experience in politics in the UK has been even local politics. For example, Bristol has been a lot more, you know, sniping and yeah. So the result of this is, in terms of the environment, I mean, I'm a Green, so I care a lot about environmental issues. Oslo became the European Green Capital for 2019, and has been cutting emissions and making a lot of changes towards becoming sustainable, removing cars and yeah, greening the city. And that's been possible because of the coalition. Each party chooses which issues are the most important to them, and they bring it to the negotiating table, and they find a compromise. Greens were radical. We wanted to really go very far, but the result is often a city government or city council leadership, which is more in line with what the majority of the people, or yeah, close enough to the majority of the people would want, for good and bad. So I'm getting to the end of my time, I think. I asked my Twitter followers what they thought I should mention. Some Norwegians wanted to draw these points out. They said that the advantages of the Norwegian system over the British is that we have a predictable 4-year electoral cycle. So just like clockwork, every 4 years we have a general election. I'm working on the next one, which is in September now. And then 2 years after that, we have locals. And whether it's a majority or minority government, the people in charge, they sit for that term. The parties tend to have manifestos, which are actually written by their members. They're not cobbled together in a back room, which I know is what Greens do, but it's not what the main parties in the UK do. Norway actually spends quite a lot funding political parties and youth parties, and that creates a really healthy political culture. And one quote was that the parties agree about the big things and argue about the small things, and I'd say that's true. A few more examples of the positive sides. I mean, it's not all perfect, but I've been asked to talk about the advantages of proportional system. There is evidence that proportional voting systems lead to less economic inequality, and obviously the Nordic countries are known to be the least unequal. And there's a reason for that. I mean, in the UK, we get a government that is more to the right economically and politically than the majority of the voters because of the way the system rewards a minority. And that's happened for most UK general elections for the last 50 years. As I said before, voter turnout is high. You know, it's between 75–85% for national elections, which is significantly higher than in the UK. And yeah, it's not the best in the world, but it's certainly quite high.
1 minute, Seth.
Right, just wrapping up. Yes, so there's also evidence that it leads to stable states. I did want to say this about the kindness, really, that it was a bit of a shock experiencing a general election in the UK, and just really the pressure and the toxicity around, you know, if it's not a democracy, if you can't choose who you want to vote for without bullying and abuse. And there's just really almost none of that in Norway, because everybody feels represented. There's no need to try and chivvy people into voting for somebody who they don't want to. Going to wrap up really quickly. There's a great article online about how New Zealand, so in my lifetime, New Zealand has gone from first past the post to proportional voting. So it's really boosted the amount of representation from minorities and from women. And yeah, it's all around a good thing. My last slide is to say that do get involved with the campaign to make votes matter. We can do this. It may seem very ambitious, but if enough people get behind it, really, it's going to be inevitable, I believe. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much indeed, Seth. And questions have already started coming in, so if you want to check the chat, both of you. The first question was from Becky. Becky, would you like to ask your question?
Okay, I just need to look at it.
We've also got a question from Hugh, actually, just before Becky's, which was why would the Tories or Labour ever agree to first past the post? Because it's kept them in power for the last 50 years. So I don't know whether that's maybe a question for Andy.
Yeah, I can have a go at that one. Yeah. Well, the Conservative Party is going to be a bit more of a tricky enough nut to crack. But if Labour could be, persuaded to back PR, I think, and you've got a situation where there's only one of the big two who would still support the status quo. Arguably, then, there's a question of how sustainable first past the post is, because, especially if Labour do, agree to go in electoral alliance with other parties, because then the Conservatives would have to do something they haven't done since 1931, and that is to basically win over 50% of the vote. Now, regarding Labour, I can, unfortunately, one or two reasons why they may not, back fair voting. But if you put if the argument just on, the amount of time they've spent in government, and the better outcomes, in good use PR, I think it should be a no-brainer really. And I mentioned in my talk about the stability index, and also Seth showed a little graphic of it there, and it showed those 5 most stable countries. At the end of the day, they're countries that use PR. They're not countries that that typically elect one-party left-wing governments like a Labour, like Labour when they do form a government, in this country. So in terms of outcomes, better outcomes, and in terms of the amount of time they've only been in power, let's be honest, last century about a third of it, it should be a no-brainer. But unfortunately, there will be 1 or 2 elements in Labour to try and get basically win round, especially those people who perhaps do have a little bit of delusion that they can perhaps still win elections, and also maybe govern for a generation like the Tories have done from time to time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Becky, you ready to go now?
Yep. So I just said that people are so deeply burrowed in their echo chambers these days. So how does a campaign for PR make the noise it needs to be heard by people who don't already know about it and or agree with it already?
Okay, well, before the pandemic, one of the things that make Votes Matter have done a lot is holding street stalls, in local towns. Something I've run myself, and also there have been the National Action Days, and certainly, the one in the summer last year certainly made a bit of national attention when it showed pictures of some placards held by the bridge by the House of Parliament, basically drawing attention to the issue. So it's about getting more and more people involved and willing to spend a bit of time to improve the visibility of the issue. Is where it comes through.
Seth, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I was involved with MVM since 2017, and what I didn't realize was how much support there is in the public every time they poll among Labour members and in the general public. If you ask people if they think that seats should match votes, people will say yes. So really, it has to be felt like an inevitability. We should also not forget that Labour were at a point once before where they were under so much pressure to agree to at least considering supporting a change in the voting system that they had it in their manifesto. So I think we can get back to that point again. But Brexit, for good and bad, is not the overriding issue now. So perhaps the time has come for electoral reform.
Thank you. The next one I want to call up is Barbara Imrie. Barbara, can you turn your mic on and make your point quickly, please?
Hello, my question is really for Seth. In Britain, both of the big parties are internally divided between a centrist and an extremist wing. How does that compare with the situation in Norway, please, Seth? Because it makes it very tumultuous here.
Absolutely, it's a good question, and really what we are talking about is that the two main parties are really they say that it's a strength that they are these big tents which represent a big broad range of views, but it's hard to escape the idea that it's really a weakness. It's we've got the Conservative Party who really are dancing to the tune of the far right, and Labour have just been tragically divided and can't get their act together, it seems to me. In Norway, however, there isn't that need. The coalition happens out in the open. You know what you're voting for, and voters are free to choose. Over your lifetime, maybe your views change in one or the other direction, and your party affiliation changes, and that's fine. It's just much healthier to have it out in the open, and voters. You wouldn't think that a coalition is more predictable, but actually voters are actually smarter than often parties credit them.
So is part of what you're saying that there is no need for the big tent approach to a party in Norway because they can have smaller parties and it works? Is that part of what you're saying?
We still have two dominant parties, but their vote share is around 25%. So they were always reliant on the smaller parties, and actually they spend a lot of energy building bridges rather than knocking each other. Of course, they're playing for votes, but it's all about making friends if you want to have power and keep power. It's just, I would say it's a much healthier way of going.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Seth. Helen asks, Helen?
Hello, yeah. I was so excited when Keir Starmer came on the scene, and then really disappointed that he hasn't said anything about proportional representation yet. What can we do to get him on board?
Andy?
Yeah, well, I think I said in my speech there's 150 constituency Labour Party have now backed it. It might even be close to 170, possibly. But you know, the pressure is piling up. And one thing I read online in the last few weeks is there was an online meeting involving one or two key Labour, including the former Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell, and apparently PR was a big issue. But you know, in the mainstream media, it is certainly frustrating, isn't it? This, you know, when you read, you know, about a big speech Starmer is doing, he seems to be talking more about devolution, you know, or you know, perhaps something patriotic. But I would say that, you know, if the level of support that there now appears to be in the Labour Party, hopefully there will be a vote at this year's Labour Party conference. Hopefully, and if they are a Democratic Party, you know, hopefully there will be that vote, and hopefully, you know, it will become an issue that will come to the fore later this year.
Great, thank you very much. Adrian, I'm sorry I missed you out. Would you like to ask yours?
Yeah, hi, thanks for that presentation from you both. It's really interesting. I mean, my concern is that no matter how strong the argument, the physical structure and way that the Commons is represented is ultimately adversarial. It's one side sitting opposite the opposition, and we will never get to any sort of consensual politics, as the very nice photograph of Norwegian Parliament showed, whilst we're stuck with a building that is not fit for purpose and which is going to cost £4 billion to bring back to some sort of Victorian Gothic representation of what our current government thinks government looks like. Discuss.
Seth, how about you starting? Well, Andy thinks.
Sure. Yeah, it does look like a big hill to climb. I mean, what I would say is that Make Votes Matters has popped up with a very focused take on the whole issue, really saying proportional representation is the aim. And following that, I mean, it's not a panacea, but following that, we can tackle broader change. You know, the Electoral Reform Society is over 100 years old. And of course, there's you know, issues about funding and media. There are very many related issues to political reform, but it's a case of how much you want to bite off. You know, how far are we going to get if we don't focus on the overarching aim? Yeah, but you can also get involved with other organizations who have broader, you know, Unlock Democracy. Yeah, have broader goals.
Andy, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, I think what Adrian was saying there. Yeah, I fully agree with the comments you're saying there about, you know, the way Parliament is set up. And I recall in the aftermath of one of those heated debates, you know, when Brexit was going through Parliament, there was one Conservative, one Labour MP who were later, you know, on a programme together, and they admitted perhaps, you know, that, you know, the extent of the way that the argument was heated was perhaps, you know, exacerbated, if you like, by the fact that everyone was sitting opposite each other rather than in a horseshoe, style parliament. So it definitely adds to the bitter nature of our politics, and it is disappointing when you're seeing these stories about the government just going to they're going to just revamp Parliament as it is and so on. But it would have been a golden opportunity, wouldn't it, to get everything reworked in terms of where everyone's seats sits, so that it's not opposite each other. So yeah, I totally agree with you. There. It is another side issue linked to the issue of the voting system.
Right. Thanks, Andy. We've got about another 5 minutes left and 3 questions. The first is from Sue Hartley. Sue, do you want to put your question as quickly as you can, please?
Yes, well, just that I hadn't realised that New Zealand had switched to PR so recently, and I wondered if either of the speakers were aware of any lessons that we could learn from that experience.
Seth has put a link in the chat about that. Do you want to say anything else, Seth?
Just that it takes a bit of luck. The truth is, and it's horse trading, but that it's about the parties putting pressure, just as we've said. But yeah, Materia really explains it well in that.
Okay, Andy, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, I mean, the New Zealand situation happened on the backdrop of 2 wrong winner elections in 1978 and 1981. The equivalent of the Conservative Party won both those elections, but Labour won the popular vote on both occasions. And it's created a if you like a feeling that the politicians don't represent us in New Zealand, and then Labour seem to make movements in New Zealand to suggest that we will reform it, but then they didn't. Then the National Conservative leader Jim Bolger, when he became PM, he then said, well, you know what, we'll exploit Labour, we'll have a referendum. They're not going to, they won't possibly go with it, but he was proven wrong. So there are some lessons there. I mean, but with New Zealand, it did come via a referendum, and since that period, there have been a few referendums in Canada which haven't gone through, and I do fear that some of the supporters of I suppose have picked up on that to try and make sure that we make sure that the issue doesn't become widely discussed. But certainly since New Zealand switched to PR, they've been lauded for their approach to COVID, big time, I think is a way of saying that. And as I mentioned in my little speech, every single New Zealand Parliament of 3 years has run its full term. So they have, and perhaps as the other point as well, there was a following referendum in 2011, and support for the MMP, mixed member proportional system, had actually increased from had increased so it was 56, a little bit, from the 1996 referendum. So it was, or 1993 referendum rather, and there was more support in 2011 for the new proportional system. So it looks like it's very much here to stay in New Zealand.
Okay, so building on that very quickly, Andy, Jenny asks, how can we make proportional representation accessible to the masses, especially with regards to the language and the complexity of the voting systems? Very quickly.
Yeah, I'll counter. So it's important not to focus on specifics of systems. It's important to highlight it's about seats matching votes. 10% of the seats, 10% of the votes equals 10% of the seats. Simple as that. And I think also one thing I picked up from a recent Make Votes Matter meeting is it perhaps needs to become more of a working class issue. Perhaps it's been too much of a Guardian readers issue, and people perhaps, especially in strong Labour areas, need to understand that if you're voting for a Labour MP in a safe area, all you're really doing is voting in that particular, local election for a local MP, and the access votes don't go anywhere, and certainly don't go towards, the type of society they want. And just one other point I'll pick up with Alan as well. Perhaps the kind of language needs to start using things like the injustice of the unfair voting system. That's perhaps something we need to hear more about, because let's face it, most of us, we are absolutely cheated.
Great. Thank you, Andy, and thank you very much, Seth. Again, if you would like to get involved in supporting a fair voting system, not just nationally, but locally as well, please drop me an email to mvm.stroud@gmail.com, mvm.stroud@gmail.com. That address is further up in the chat, and I'll make sure that you are kept up to date with what's going on, because if we do manage to persuade Labour to vote for, or Labour to agree to PR, we need mass public support so that they won't backtrack next time they come to write their manifesto. So thank you both very much. Thank you, everyone. We'll take a break now, and we will start again at 8:30.
Yes, and
thank you very much.
Thank you for the speakers. Great to see you, Seth, and thank you, Andy.
Okay.
And we will come back at 8:30, and that's just for members then, that second part of the meeting. So see you then.